How's it going, everybody? This is Jake Baker with the Bloomington Edge football team, here to talk some Fantasy 101 with everybody. Just some tips and tricks for this upcoming fantasy football season. First thing I'd like to go over are the draft day tips. These are 5 bullet points that I want to go over just to give you guys some good tips to be successful in your draft. First one being understand the value of quarterbacks in your league. What I mean by this is don't take quarterbacks too early in the first round. You're going to want to take them a little bit later because there are going to be a lot of good quarterbacks that are going to get you the same amount of points as your Tom Brady's and your Aaron Rodgers. Trust me on that. Quarterbacks will put up points, so save those picks for later. Next is take what the draft gives you. What I mean by this is take running backs and take wide receivers early because they will be the ones that are going to get you the bulk of your points. So definitely try to take running backs and wide receivers if they're on the board. Next, know where to draft tight ends. A lot of people overvalue tight ends. Rob Gronkowski is a phenomenal player. He will get you a lot of points. But the graphic I have here in parentheses, the number 1 tight end will only get as much points as the number 10 wide receiver and only earn as much points as the number 20 running back. So keep that in mind. Don't overvalue tight ends. Save tight ends for the later rounds. They will be up there, I promise you that. Next, understand the value of kickers and defense. This one is pretty simple. Just don't draft kickers or defense in early rounds, in mid rounds. Save those typically for the last 2 picks. That's what I suggest. Next one, pay attention to injuries and suspensions. This one's also pretty self-explanatory. Just know your NFL news. Be up to date on that stuff. If someone's injured or someone gets suspended, just be sure don't start them that week. Obviously, that would be definitely a mistake. Here I have my top 10 PPR players in the draft. This will be the first round in a lot of people's leagues. If you have a PPR league or a standard league, that'll kind of depend who you're going to draft in the first round. But if you guys want to check this out, I have the points per game for last season. These are the top guys, the top dogs in the league. They're going to be juggernauts week in and week out. So check that out, pause the video, and give that a look. Next is fantasy football top 5 do's. First one is know your league scoring system. I touched on that briefly with the PPR. What PPR is it's points per reception. So receivers and running backs, when they get receptions from the quarterback, they will get extra points per reception. I'm in a standard league, which basically just does not add in the PPR. It's just a standard league, no points per reception. So know your league. That's going to kind of depend if you're going to get a running back or receiver. That can definitely change it. Next, know your players' bye weeks. What I mean by this is don't draft a lot of players that are on the same team or a lot of players that have the same bye week because then you are going to be in big trouble come that bye week. So be sure to know your bye weeks because you will have to go into the free agency to try to put together a team. And it's not pretty. Next, upgrade your starting roster whenever possible. This is keeping your eye on free agents, seeing if there's anyone out there that has been dropped from someone else in your league that will be able to benefit you in the future. Definitely check free agency often. I highly recommend that. Next, stay up to date with NFL news. I hit on that earlier with injuries and suspensions. Just know who's injured, who's suspended, who isn't playing that week, just so you can get them out of your starting lineup and put someone in there that's going to generate some points for you. The final point, know your starting lineup requirements. This is with whether you have 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, or 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex position. Just know how many people you're going to have out there week in and week out so you can draft the correct amount of guys, draft the right amount of guys. Next are my top 5 don'ts. The first one being don't make roster decisions with your heart. What I mean by this is you diehard fans, I know how much you are a 49er fan, but they won't be offended if you take someone else in your fantasy football league. So don't make those decisions with your heart because you're going to be in trouble for bye weeks, and if your team falls, so does your fantasy football team. So just don't make decisions with your heart. It's going to end up hurting you in the long run. Next one, don't fall in love with sleepers. If you guys don't know what sleepers are basically players who aren't really well known, but they maybe had a good preseason or were really good in college, so people tend to pick them up. They're like, oh, this guy's going to be really good, but you never know that for sure, so don't waste a first-round pick on a sleeper. That's just not a smart decision. Next, don't ignore your league's free agents. Touched on that. Definitely check out your free agency. It's definitely going to be a positive for you. Fourth one, don't neglect to update your roster every week. Same thing, NFL news. Keep up to date on injuries, on suspensions. You're going to need to do that. That's very important. Don't worry about drafting a kicker or defense to the last 2 rounds. I really emphasize this one just because some people just still draft kickers or defenses when there's 4 or 5 picks left, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Here are my top 5 sleepers. I always love sleepers. I think it's the most fun part about fantasy football. There's guys that just come out of nowhere and are just solid producers for you week in and week out. First one is Josh Doxson, Washington for the Washington Redskins. As Deshaun Jackson departed from that team, I think he's really going to have an opportunity to flourish in that role. He was a first-round pick in 2016. He was out with an Achilles injury, but I think he's going to come back with a strong year. Next is Jack Doyle. He finished 13th among fantasy tight ends last season, but that was after Colby Fleener played a couple weeks, and then he took over eventually, so he was still a really good producer after that. Next is Kareem Hunt. He's in a running back position in Kansas City. He's in a bout with Spencer Ware, so you got to might split carries there, but I think in the long run he's going to end up taking the position. He had a great preseason, so he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Carson Wentz, don't normally put quarterbacks in my sleepers, but I really like the additions that Philadelphia has made in the offseason and Alshon Jeffrey, and I just really like Carson Wentz as a football player. He just seems like he's an intense guy, he's a hard worker, so he's definitely going to be someone you're going to want to watch out for. Next one is D.D. Westbrook, who's out of Oklahoma. Really explosive wide receiver, someone for Jacksonville having over-the-top threat. He had a really good preseason, a couple 100-yard performances, 50-yard touchdowns. I think he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. I just want to thank you all for watching. If you're not following Bloomington Edge on Twitter, definitely hit us with a follow, or check us out on Facebook. Also, check out our website for any upcoming events we have here in the community in Bloomington. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like and share with your friends. Thanks so much. Hope you guys have a good week.